The Peterhead Prison Riots. So it's been 35 years since the Peterhead Prison Riots up in Scotland. And this is another edition of Prison News. And this is what's in the headlines today. And the reason why this is in the headlines, because as I just mentioned, it's been 35 years since the riot took place. So the headline actually says, the riot that rocked Peterhead Prison and required the SAS to step in. Now I'm just going to be doing a brief talk about what happened down the Peterhead riots and where it was actually at, because it's just popped up. But this is actually something that I've been planning on doing for a number of weeks, because one of the people that was actually involved in the riot was a fella named Malky Leggett, and I've actually got his book, but I still haven't had time to read through it yet. So when I read the book and research into it properly, then I will do an episode just designated to the actual Peterhead Prison Riot. So it says the Peterhead Prison Riot lasted for 5 days, during which chaos seeped into the building as prison officer Jackie Stewart endured a terrifying hostage situation. For over a century, Peterhead Prison was the main lockup in the northeast of Scotland. During that time, the institute gained a sinister reputation, being branded the Hate Factory or Scotland's Gulag. Relationships between staff and inmates had been decimated by years of violence and reprisals, and it was in September 1987 that the most notorious incident began. Inmate Malky Leggett, who I've just mentioned before, had just been put on a minor report, an act that had so enraged the convicted murderer, it had pushed him to attack a prison officer by stabbing him in the leg and throwing hot fat over him. And from that one act, chaos seeped into the building as prisoners reportedly began creating balaclavas out of bandages and rags as they started to tear the place apart. Around 50 dangerous convicts took complete control of the prison's D block. Many were serving life sentences and had nothing to lose. Leggett, alongside other ringleaders, captured prison officers Jackie Stewart and Bill Florence and held them hostage. Bill Florence, the unfortunate victim of Leggett's earlier attack, was released after the first day, but Jackie was kept. Jackie had gotten himself into the situation by rushing to his companion's aid, during which he was swarmed and surrounded. At the moment, I realised my life was in danger. This is what he went on to say. So Jackie, who'd got himself in that situation, went on to say, when he gave a statement, I didn't know that I had actually been stabbed until they took me up onto the roof. Just after I had been stabbed, my body was out of action. I think that is why I didn't feel anything. I was screaming out, trying to make them stop, but I had no control. As the adrenaline waned, most of the prisoners gave themselves up to the authorities, but Leggett and his circle refused. They retreated to the prison's roof, creating barricades and traps as they went. Jackie was paraded by the inmates and subjected to constant beatings. As the siege began to drag on, there was little doubt that prisoners would eventually make good on their threats to kill the poor man. He said if the prisoners didn't get what they wanted, I got another beating. It was continuous. In total, Jackie was stabbed 3 times and his pockets were filled with lighter fluid as Leggett and his entourage threatened to set him alight. Pressure was growing on politicians to end the siege, with prison authorities eventually calling on help from the British Army in the form of the SAS. However, this was a controversial request, as it was believed that bringing in the army for a civilian matter could set a dangerous precedent. The debate ended when the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, gave the go-ahead for the SAS to intervene. 20 men were flown from RAF Linham. Assault teams were kitted out in body armour and fireproof coveralls. Stealth was seen as a necessity in the rescue of Jackie, so soldiers wore trainers instead of military boots. They wielded wooden batons as well as 9mm Brownings for backup. Each team also carried flashbangs and tear gas canisters. On October the 1st, SAS squads hit Peterhead Prison from all sides simultaneously, hoping to cause maximum fear and panic among inmates. A four-man rescue team that entered the building from the roof, blown doors away with explosives and thrown gas and stun brigades as they secured Jackie. Leggett was the last one to give himself up. He and two other ringleaders were sentenced to an extra 27 years inside. Reflecting on the riot, Jackie said, having an extensive yet challenging 25-year career in Peterhead Prison, Jackie Stewart concluded by saying, "One of the reasons why I do not let the siege of over 30 years ago play on my mind today is that I no longer harbour any bitterness or anger to the prisoners involved. I was able to return home afterwards to a loving and supportive family." So that's all it says in that article there. But I have done a little bit of research in it when someone asked us about it. Like I say, it was quite a few weeks ago now. But I am going to do an extensive episode covering all of this, because there is other articles that I've seen when they've said about the SAS when they've actually went into the prison. It hasn't mentioned any of that here in this report. Well, this newspaper article. But I've been told and I've heard that the SAS went way over the top and they inflicted some injuries on the prisoners. But again, I'll research it properly, find out before I do an extensive episode on it. But it wasn't a surprise to go on to read when it said the debate ended when the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, gave the go-ahead for the SAS to intervene. And it was Margaret Thatcher that intervened when the mayor's prison riots was going on. Was it the riots? Or the mayor's breakout, sorry. It was a breakout. But there was also the Irish prisoners that went on hunger strike. And I have mentioned that in one of my videos, but I will talk about that in another video as well. I'm forgetting the name of the ringleader in that one, sorry. My mind just went blank there. But I will cover that one when the Irish prisoners went on hunger strike and quite a few of them actually died because Margaret Thatcher wouldn't give in to the demands. But on to the next story. It is involving the Met Police. There's been quite a few lately. But this one is the Jermaine Baker shooting. And the Met Police firearms officer is to face gross misconduct hearing. Now this one was in 2015 where 28-year-old Jermaine Baker was shot and killed. But it says the marksman known as W80 was found by a public inquiry to have lawfully killed Jermaine Baker. So obviously with the inquiry, it took a long time to get to this point because it was in 2015. But it's saying that he was lawfully killed. And I think the reason being was because the officer was trying to say that he gave a warning quite a few times and it looked as though Jermaine was going to grab something and then the officer let one of his shots off and actually killed him. But it says the firearms officer who killed Jermaine Baker during a foiled prison breakout almost 8 years ago faces a gross misconduct hearing, the police watchdog has announced. Mr. Baker, 28, was shot during a Metropolitan Police operation to thwart a plot to spring two prisoners from a van near Wood Green Crown Court in North London in December 2015. The marksman who pulled the trigger, known publicly as W80, was investigated on suspicion of murder, but the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS, decided not to charge him with an offence in 2017. The Independent Office for Public Conduct directed that the Met should bring disciplinary proceedings against the officer for gross misconduct following an investigation. The decision was challenged by W80 in 2019, but the Supreme Court sided with the watchdog in a ruling in July following a lengthy legal battle during which the officer was backed by the Met. A public inquiry last year concluded Mr. Baker was lawfully killed. He was unarmed, but an imitation firearm was found in the car used in the plot. Mr. Baker was among a group of men trying to freeze Izzet Aaron and his co-defendant as they were transported from Wormwood Scrubs to be sentenced for a firearms offence. A number of men jailed in 2016 for their parts in the plot. The officer who shot him had honestly believed he had ignored his instruction to show his hands and was reaching for a weapon. The IOPC has announced the marksman will now face a gross misconduct hearing, which could result in him being sacked. The IOPC Acting Director General Tom Whiting said, following the Supreme Court ruling, we carefully reviewed our original decision. We considered evidence from the public inquiry. We invited additional representations from all parties and sought additional independent assurance. We have now upheld our original decision that sh00ting should face a gross misconduct hearing. This isn't a decision we have taken lightly, but we believe that it was the right decision in 2015 and remains so following the clear ruling from the Supreme Court in July. It's important to stress that the IOPC does not decide whether or not sh00ting's actions amounted to gross misconduct. That is the role of the hearing panel, who will come to a decision after considering all of the evidence. So, I don't know why they're bringing all things like this up again, doing it all to do with the Met Police. There seems to be a lot going on at the minute with the Met Police when they're trying to, when I done a video the other day, they're trying to root out all the corrupt police. I think it said there was 1,000 Met Police officers suspended. But if it says here that he was found to have been acting lawfully when he shot him, so why all this time later is it going on saying that he could be facing a gross misconduct hearing? I'm not sure if it's just to bring this into the light so it looks as if they're actually doing something, but it doesn't make sense to me, all this, when it goes on here. It says the IOPC's decision is likely to cause further concern among the Met firearms officers, many of who put down their weapons after one of their colleagues, known only as NX121, was charged with the murder of Chris Carver. Now, I covered this one recently as well, last week I think it was, or the beginning of the week, into Chris Carver when the officer was actually charged with murder. But in that video, because I didn't know at the time, I said, well, he's probably been remanded into custody because anybody that gets charged with murder is immediately remanded into custody. But this police officer actually got bailed, and it goes on to say Mr. Carver was killed in September last year in Streatham, South London. The Metropolitan Police have said they informed the IOPC more than a year ago that they disagreed with the direction to hold a gross misconduct hearing for the officer over the incident. Deputy Commissioner Lynn Owens said, we note that the IOPC has asked the MPS to consider asking another force to hold the hearing to provide additional reassurance about the independence of the process. We do not accept that our wider call for support and legal reassurance for armed officers impinges upon our independence, nor the impartiality of the misconduct hearing process. So, after that, when the officer was actually charged with murder, it went on to say I think there was around about 6 other firearms officers laid down the weapons just in case they got called out to a scene. They've actually discharged the firearm, someone's been injured, or even more so, killed. Then the officers are going to be charged with murder. But I think there's a lot more to it than this, because when you look into the case, he was in the car, unarmed, and he was shot for no apparent reason, it seems. But we'll find out when it all comes to light, when it goes to court. So, on to the next one. And it is, I've also covered this one, but this is an updated version, so I'll just go over what it says here. And it says, crime gangs sending thugs to become prison guards so they can smuggle drugs into the prison. So the Prison Officers Association, known as the POA, says criminal gangs are trying to infiltrate prisons, getting jobs in jails because the interviews help them hide their identities as they are now done online. So again, some of this stuff that you see when you see headlines like this come up, and it's saying that they're trying to infiltrate the prisons by sending normal people, or people, well, not normal people, people that aren't really going to become prison officers. It's just people that are going to smuggle drugs into the prisons. And it's saying because interviews are done online, so it's going to be easier for them to get the job and then get them into the prisons to then start smuggling contraband into prison. But to me, I smell bullshit with this story, because there's no way someone's going to do an online application, an online interview, and then get the job of working in a prison without even coming face to face with people in the prison service, or actually going in. What about when they've got to go in and do the training? They'll be getting scrutinised then. So like I've mentioned, it seems like a bit of a bullshit one, this, but we'll still go into it. It says crime gangs are sending their members to train as prison officers so they can smuggle drugs and phones to cronies behind bars. The Prison Officers Association said gangsters are weaseling their way into jobs because interviews are now done online and allow them to easily conceal who they really are. It reckons folk are put off jobs due to low pay, leaving the service so desperate for staff they are prepared to recruit low-caliber candidates like criminals working for gangs. It can take months before the dodgy wardens' true identity is revealed and they are sacked, according to the association. The POA, which has more than 30,000 members, said in a statement, "If you get a good run, you don't get caught and get out after 6 months having made a few bucks. People can be recruited as prison officer and go into jail with the sole purpose of bringing contraband in to make a lot of money. They can do it by themselves or for an organised crime group." It added, "We are hiring the wrong people and people who can't even look you in the eye. You get paid to train and you do whatever you want after that." The union is urging the prison service to stop doing online interviews and instead return to their previous pre-pandemic recruitment method of screening candidates using person panels. The Ministry of Justice said it had bought more than 90 body scanners that had stopped more than 28,000 smuggling attempts since July 2020. Funding has been used to set up counter-corruption unit made up of 140 staff, which is working with cops to stop smuggling into jails. The Ministry of Justice said the majority of its workforce is dedicated and hard-working, but it will not hesitate to clamp down on those who break the rules. A Ministry of Justice spokesperson said, "We have bolstered the counter-corruption unit that works round the clock to clamp down on the minority who undermine our exemplary service with their dangerous behaviour, and we will not hesitate to punish those who break the rules." The Prison Officers Association said scanners are not always effective because sometimes they might not be manned. So the scanners, what they're on about, are in the prisons. Most of them are in remand prisons or local prisons. And when you go in, it's just like an X-ray machine and it can actually see if you've got anything concealed inside of you. But again, going back to this story, I don't think they're going to be doing online interviews and giving people the job without even meeting them in person. So I think there's more to it than what meets the eye with this story, which it is with most stories. You see a headline that grabs your eyes, you read into it and you think, well, that can't be right. They're not just going to do online interviews and give jobs out to anybody. And then it takes a number of months before they're found out. Found out for what? For having a criminal background or criminal associates. So I don't really believe too much into that story, because I bet you it's a lot harder to get into the prisons that way. Well, the way that they're trying to say they are. But again, like I mentioned, you've got to go and do training, even though the training's not that long. And I have done stories previously where they are giving jobs to young people, mainly like round about 21-year-old, who aren't really dedicated to the job, which is making this prison system even worse than what it actually is now. And they're not equipped to deal with situations in prison. and they're getting exploited. But they will have been scrutinised before the interview. That's not the way that's going on here. Don't get us wrong, the prison system is corrupt, and the way that people or prisoners sometimes use the screws, especially the ones in the private prisons, there is a lot of corruption going on with screws and inmates. But yes, I think I'll leave that one there for now. People have covered quite a bit on that. But again, if you are enjoying the content, remember to comment, like and subscribe. But I will be covering more videos, like I've just mentioned at the beginning there, more so on the Peterhead Prison Riots. And yes, I've got a lot more stories due to come up. So stay tuned, people. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.